Kucki Low is my guest. She's a 20th century aviation pioneer who has had a high-flying life and a few bumpy landings. Her inspirational, motivational memoir is called This is Kucki, Your Pilot Speaking. On from private pilot, only female.
In Namibia, yeah.
In Namibia.
There probably were some in South Africa.
Yes, let's be clear.
Yeah.
Okay,
Namibia.
only female Namibia.
Yeah.
And then you
First
became
female.
a flight instructor. Why?
Because, well, first of all, mostly a lot of pilots become flight instructors because it's a good way to build up hours.
Right.
And, you know, the airline doesn't want you straight off with a commercial license. They want you to have some experience, obviously. And I also loved it. I mean, I didn't find it that easy to learn to fly, so I really loved imparting my passion onto the students. I loved instruction, I really did.
And what's the key to being a good instructor
I think
in the air?
Well, I think being able to, first of all, I think one of the advantages that I had is that probably students looked at me and said, come on, I mean, if she can do it, I can do this, you know, this can't be that hard if she can do it. That, I think, was one of my advantages, and I think just being passionate about it and imparting that passion into your students and making them realize that they can do it.
So you're teaching a student and you're not too sure of the student, and you want to teach them to do a spin.
Right.
And they freeze or something.
Well, teaching them to do a spin is a really good way to get sort of credibility with them.
Mm-hmm. What is a spin exactly?
Well, it's when the aircraft stalls and then you put on rudder and sort of spirals down.
And everybody has to do it, right?
I don't know whether they still have to do them now, but in South Africa it was mandatory. You had to do a spin to pass your pilot's license. And it's a really good way of feeling that you're in control of the aircraft, that nothing can happen, that you are in charge. Because you can get it out of the spin easily once you know what you're doing. And it's a great way to give you confidence. And I always used to love doing spins with my students because it really sort of set the tone for the class.
Right,
You know, after that.
and you had controls too, in case the
Yes,
student didn't
you
quite
always had-
pull out
yeah.
of the spin.
Yeah.
Did you have students freeze?
I had one student freeze on a landing once, and that was pretty scary. That was the only scary moment I ever had was teaching.
What about the written exams? I know you didn't completely finish school at one point, so written exams were not your best thing.
No, that's an understatement. I mean, I left school, you know, at 15 when my father had his first heart attack, and I helped run the photography business that we owned. So I had very limited schooling. I had hardly any math, hardly any science, and English wasn't my first language, because a little bit of schooling that I did in a German school. And
in a boarding school or a regular school?
I lived in a boarding school, and then I did a German school. So I mean, I had very limited, you know, formal schooling. And that made it really difficult for me to get my the written part of my commercial
Right,
license.
flunking exams is not the best way to
It's
start.
not the most encouraging. No, I was so devastated the first time I
bet.
failed so badly. I mean, I couldn't. Because I felt I was quite cocky, and I thought, oh, I can do this, you know.
I can sit on a pillow, fly a big jet. I
Then
should be able
pass
to
these
pass an
exams.
exam.
And when I failed so hopelessly the first time, I mean, I actually went up to Johannesburg to do I did a home study course with my instructor, and I thought I was reasonably ready, and then I went and did a two weeks sort of crash course to prepare myself for the exams, and I flew up to Johannesburg to do that. And when I walked out of that exam, I mean, I knew I had failed so hopelessly. And you know, when I landed in the sort of deflated figure that landed back in Walfish Bay, you know, was quite different to the cocky one that had left 2 weeks earlier.
I bet.
Thinking I can do this.
Commercial pilot. How many hours?
A minimum
Then?
of 200.
Minimum of 200. And did you join flying clubs so that you could get free planes or
There was nothing
to learn?
like that there.
Nothing
you
like
know.
that.
I mean, there were two people that had private planes that they would hire out to you, and then the instructor would fly in from Windhoek twice a month to give lessons. So you used the plane when he was there for the weekend, and you rented the plane. But there wasn't no such thing like a flying club or anything like that.
Your first commercial flying experience was?
My first commercial was the Holiday Magic trip up to Johannesburg.
A cargo jet,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, a Cessna.
And a Cessna. Not a jet.
No, not a jet. And they loaded that thing up, and I was very new at all of this, and also very, I just let them pack the plane in instead of figuring out, how much load I could carry. They just filled the thing up, and I got in.
In a heavy plane, so to speak, with
Yeah.
Holiday Magic. I
With
remember Holiday Magic a little
boxes
bit.
filling the
It
whole
was
plane.
lotions and
Yeah.
potions and things like that. I think you smelled like a cucumber if you used Holiday Magic,
Yes,
but I'm not sure.
I did. I
Can't
never
quite
tried
remember.
it. But
So you're flying a plane that's really too heavy.
yeah, that was overloaded.
Was that your fault, your problem,
Well,
or
it was
whose?
my fault in that I should have checked it. But, they just, the ground crew just loaded in whatever boxes they had there. And I fitted into my seat, and that was it.
The dangers of that are?
Well, the dangers are if you overload it, you could, stall the aircraft because you can't get off the ground. Or,
well, that.
Or you get off the ground and then can't hold it.
And the second flight or the third flight, eventually, who did you join up with?
Then I flew for, I actually gave instruction at a flying club in Cape Town. And, back then flying was a very close-knit community and everybody knew everybody. And so, everybody knew me because I was the only woman pilot that was always asking for clearances flying out of DF Milan Airport because I was instructing out of there. And then the chief pilot from the Makwaland Airways had done all my flight tests and my instrument rating tests and flight renewals and all those things. So he knew what my flying was like, and he really wanted me to fly for them. So he suggested it to the owner of the airline, who thought that it might be a great idea, would give him a lot of publicity, but he was also a little bit leery to be the first airline in South Africa to hire a female pilot. So this is going to sound very funny, but they came up with this idea they would have a questionnaire running in their aircraft for 3 months. That,
Right.
that the passengers would fill in when they booked in for their schedule. And the questionnaire had 3 questions on it. And the first one was, if you were booking in for the schedule and the pilot for the day on the schedule was a female, question number 1, would you assume that the company had hired her, she was as well qualified as any male pilot? Fancy that.
Yes.
Or would you be a little bit leery and would have preferred a male pilot? Or question number 3, would you refuse to fly? Well, so out of all those questionnaires that they got back in 3 months, there was one that had ticked off, I would refuse to fly. And under the comment section, he said, I would never fly with a woman. A woman's place is in the kitchen.
Not in the cockpit.
Not in the cockpit.
No. But you were an air hostess at one point
I was an air
along
hostess
the
to
way.
build up hours, yeah, because, when I came to Cape Town, I needed to find a way to make a living, and I also needed to find a way to build up my hours. So I worked as an air hostess on a Dakota.
Oh.
And not a pilot, air hostess. And then I could rent the plane that the company had for very minimum
So it was a
cost.
bargain. So you could fly, do what you love,
Yeah,
if you
and-
were an air hostess in the day or the night,
Yes.
and passed out the Oreos.
And passed out the OS and the coffee. And to this day, when I smell those cookies, makes me slightly nauseous.
I'm sure, because I think you're right about it. It
Yeah.
was Oreos and bad coffee.
Yeah, and coffee. But it was fun, and through that, life is strange, because through that I connected with a pilot in Port Elizabeth, because we used to spend the night in Port Elizabeth and then hop all the way back to Cape Town again.
Love at first flight? Love at first sight?
Love at second sight, yeah.
Second sight. So he's a pilot, you're a pilot.
And he had just done what I wanted to do. He'd just done his instructor's rating, and he was working actually in a small office in Port Elizabeth.
Right.
And he said to me, I'll help you get your instructor's rating, Every time you come down, we'll do some training. And so that's how I got my instructor's rating.
One of my favorite stories in the book is when you were flying and the weather was bad, and you decided smartly, because you're still alive today, and every pilot who bucks the weather, isn't, decided to put down and tie up your aircraft.
Yes.
Where were you?
Oh, that was in a small little place in the middle of nowhere. And I had thought that I could outrun the thunderstorm, but it didn't work. And I thought, no, this is getting too close. It was incredibly bumpy, and it started to rain, and I thought, oh, I better put this plane down somewhere. And I landed on this little landing strip in the middle of nowhere. And by the time I got down there, it was just bucketing down, and I tied up my aircraft, and I put, as much as I could, and I put stones on the tie-ups so that the thing wouldn't, because it was a little
Right,
150.
so you'd have a plane to go back to.
And then I ran into town in the pouring rain, and the town was maybe 10 minutes away. Mm-hmm. And there was nobody to be seen in this place. I was running down the main road, completely drenched by this time, my hair all clumped. And there was somebody standing in the garage looking at me, and they probably thought I was an alien running down this road in the pouring rain. And I ran up to him and I said, oh, I just wanted to take some shelter and wait for the storm to pass. And I told him my story, and I'm sure he didn't believe me. But he did invite me in, and his wife made me gave me a shower and let me have a shower there, and they gave me something to eat. And then to them, it was probably the biggest experience
I'm sure.
ever.
It was the talk of the town. It had to be.
Talk of them,
A little
probably
tiny town.
For the next year, there's this woman, crazy girl, running down the main street.
Well, Leonardo da Vinci said, as you know, for once you have tasted flight, you will walk the earth with your
Yes.
eyes turned skywards.
Yes.
For there you have been, and there you will long to return. When was the last time you actually flew in the pilot seat?
Actually, I flew an ultralight about 10 years ago, and I thought maybe
In Canada? Here.
In Abbotsford, yeah. And I thought maybe I would get back to flying, but it's expensive, and to just have a private pilot license to flip around is not that exciting.
Sure.
But I think now I might, because I've had so many opportunities to fly now since my book came out.
And you probably have to upgrade now.
Well,
Right?
you'd have
they
to
make
redo,
they make you redo a few things.
Yeah, they would make me redo a few things, all right.
Do you have a favorite plane? A little plane, a Cessna 172?
I love the Cessna
Piper.
172. I loved, as far as sort of twin engines, I loved the Twin Command. That was just my absolute favorite aircraft, because it just sort of felt like it was you. I mean, it was just part of you. There was no,
Sure.
I loved flying that plane.
And who wouldn't you fly with?
Well,
I don't mean the airline, I mean the person.
the interesting thing is when you first learn to fly, you'll fly with anybody because you just want to get up in the plane. And then when you know what you're doing, you look back and you think, oh, God, I flew with this guy. I must have been crazy,
I know. I've had those experiences, and I think any pilot that checks everything on the little plane
Yeah.
before you get in,
Yeah, pre-flight check, yeah.
pre-flight check, you say,
Yeah.
okay, he or she cares that we stay up here.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And
nice to meet you. Great
it was
stories.
lovely
Great
being-
stories. Too many
lovely being
stories.
here.
This is Kucki, your pilot speaking. I'm Fanny Kiefer, not your pilot. Remember, you can catch our conversations on YouTube or join me on Twitter at Fanny Kiefer. There will be many more high-flying, adventurous guests to come, and thanks for watching Shaw TV and being with me today.